Okay. I'm gonna try to capture um, what happened in 1993 when my dad died. Um, I was down in San Diego, but 93 was a hard year for me. Um, my dad died that year. Uh, the Polish girl dumped me that year. I rolled my Jeep that year. But at this time, um, I was in San Diego. We had learned 30 days prior that my dad had been diagnosed with colon cancer and pancreatic cancer. He had, for the whole previous year, he had lost a bunch of weight and looked like he was getting in really good shape. Looked like he was in the best shape of his life. Uh, we got a phone call that he had gone to the hospital, that he uh, he had complained of like not going to be able to go to the bathroom, and the doctors ran some tests and they discovered this. And I remember just, whoa, it was a big hit. Didn't really know how bad it was. You could tell that, no one was really being forthright, but I knew enough that colon cancer, pancreatic cancer is bad. He went downhill quick. He lost even more weight. They put him on, IV meds, like push a button, gives him meds. So he's getting like morphine. And so he's not always with it. And it was really hard to watch that. I went up and visited it a couple times. And then I was in San Diego when I got the phone call. And I had worked a shift for delivering pizzas earlier that day. There was something like a scraping noise going on in my axle. I went into the auto parts shop. And while I was at the shop, they were working on it, and I think they're saying that, the rotor's shot. And, you need to get new rotors done. And I get this phone call from my mom saying, "You got to come home. Dad's not doing good. It's bad." And I went in there and I remember stopping them working in my car and said, "Put it all back together. I got to go. Put it back together." And they were like saying, "No, we really need to get this fixed. This is like, we legally can't put this back together so bad, And I was like, "I don't care." And they said, "We can't." And I was in there like with tools, with their tools saying, "Get out of my way. Let me put this back together." And I got my hub back on, got my wheel back. They going, and I said, "Put it down, put it down. I got to get out of here." And I got my Jeep and I drove. And it was storming, rain. I had to drive 12 hours, drive all night. I remember windshield wipers were stopping working in my Jeep, and I stole a squeegee from the gas station, and I'm sticking it out the window, and I'm using it like this, trying to see where I'm driving, and it's horrible visibility, and just driving all night. Back then there's no cell phones, nothing. There's no contact, so I'm just in the blind, going as fast as I can, driving all night to get there. It was intense. It was intense fighting the storm. The whole when wind would hit my Jeep, it would blow. There was a part of the five that was closed for wind, and I went around the roadblock and kept driving and just made it through. The sun's coming up, and I'm getting up to the mountain roads. And I remember pulling up in the driveway, and I come running up, and people are stopping me at the door. My mom's out there and stopped me. My dad had already passed. I had missed it by just a couple hours. And man, that was that hit me. I didn't get to talk to my dad. I didn't get to tell him that I loved him. There was so much I didn't get to tell him. Uh, I carried that. Oh my gosh. And even throughout my life with everything I've done, I just had this feeling that he never knew. He never knew. He never knew. He was a good dad. He never knew. That was left unsettled for me, for unresolved for so long. That was that whole year, with the Polish girl leaving me. That happened not too much before this. Um, it was shortly after that I rolled my Jeep up in the mountains off a dirt mountain road. Uh, um, it was a bad year. My gosh, that day, we were talking about, the family doesn't have a lot of money. And we need to get him a coffin. Uh, my mom, dressed him. I went down to the garage, my dad's shop, and curious, what happened. My dad was getting ready to put some shelving in, so he had just purchased a bunch of pine planks, nice pine, 12-inch planks, and I started building a coffin. Never built one before. Just started, making guesstimated measurements, started working, planning it out, screwing it together, dowel pegs, wooden handles, alone in that shop. I put straw on the bottom of it, put around the body, made a lid for it. I stained it like a maple stain. So it was white pine with dark, a rich maple stain, brought out the grain from my dad. Um, Put him in the coffin. They were arranged for a service at there was a um, like a church, over the next mountain down the road. Word went out in the community. The whole community showed up for his services. I remember putting my dad in the casket uh, into the church when they're having a service, and all my brothers and sisters are lined up in the front pew, in order of age. So all these kids were all crying, and my grandparents on my mom's side showed up, and my grandfather, who was the colonel in the Air Force, leans over and in my ear he says, "You're the man of the family now. Be the man. Men don't cry." And I stood up as straight as I could, sucked in those tears, just stood there like I get attention, and I was going to be strong. I I don't remember crying after that. Like it was done for me. That was the end of that emotion. And there's this realization that, whoa, what's gonna happen? We had a lot of support from the community up and down the river. Um, I remember when we carried my dad's casket out, we buried him up on the mountain, behind the house. Um, I put on my dad's turnouts, his fire turnouts, and a bunch of the other. He was part of the fire department down there, and they turn on their turnouts. We all carried the casket out, and we lowered him down into the grave, and I filled it in. Um, Very visceral. The making of the casket, putting burying him. It was hard. And it's funny, I felt very alone, but there were other people there. Like my dad's brother was there, Uncle Steve. He was a great guy. Um, you know, my brother Noah's there. There were other people. I felt very alone making the casket and filling the grave in. And wow, yeah. Um, my dad. It was weird to process. Um, didn't want to go back there again. The family went and visited all the time. Um, Took us a long time to get him a gravestone. I went, tried being man of the house, there's the firewood stuff and taking care of the family. And, ended up moving back up to Northern California. Got involved with the fire department. It seemed like the thing to do. We kind of take my dad's place in the community. Maybe begin to take on, be the man. Um, and that's kind of where that began. Really gotta be in charge. Gotta save the day. And so that going on those calls for the fire department or car accidents and vehicle rollovers and just showing up and really having purpose, being the man was a big part of all of that. There was definitely a shift in that, and that's the fire department there. Gosh, running into a burning building, fire hose turnouts, and car accidents on that river road all the time, and some of them were gnarly, or a motorcycle versus deer. But yeah, a lot of carnage, and I seem to be good with that. A vehicle flips over and it's half submerged in the river and it's almost being washed away. The person inside drowning and running down there and driving in and holding their head above water until we can get the car secured and pulling them out. And ah, even the ones that went bad, I was good with. Like we had a vehicle flew off the road with a teenage girl in it, and it went upside down in this marsh. We show up there and we trudge out into the marsh, and she's still in there, trapped underneath the car, and she's honking the horn. And you could tell the car is kind of settling, and we're trying to lift the car, and we couldn't our vehicles were getting stuck trying to pull it, and the jacks on the vehicle couldn't lift it because of the marshy ground, and the vehicle settled more, and she's honking the horn less and less, and we're trying, you have 10 guys trying to pick the car up, and we were all sinking into the marsh, and the horn slowly stops, and she drowns. That was everyone there was like really, really affected. And I don't remember having it hit me like it hit them. But those kind of gnarly calls. Yeah, that was the beginning of the be the man years. And that fire department definitely did that. And, and that eventually led me into, well, a lot of times, when you're going these calls, you're waiting for, the ambulance. They had the life-saving gear. They the one going code 3 or getting to the hospital. Those guys, those were the real heroes. And so, I went and started. I said, I'm going to work for a Northern Sister ambulance, and showed up at their door, and they weren't hiring, but I didn't care. I bought myself a uniform and sat in their offices until they hired me, and I eventually worked for them and loved that job. Yeah. So that was the death of my dad. If you've made it this far, it means you're hungry for more. I got 3 things for you. Click on the links below. For 1, get on our mailing list. You can pre-order the book coming out this summer. 2, our Patreon account. You get tiered access to exclusive content. And 3, visit our social media sites. There's a lot out there I want you to see. Do it. Do it now.